Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Eason and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Wednesday, February the 7th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Your second daily dose of happy for the day. And fans who listen to the morning podcast will be pleased and happy to note that, yes, we are getting the snow. My wife is ecstatic. The only little problem is we got some ice on top, so we're trying to get rid of that. But, you know, you take what you can. At least she's got a foundation. Now we have another snow that comes on top of that. She'll have great skiing conditions. That's the main thing for her. As far as the rest of Connecticut, they're not so happy. But, you know, all I can say is if you're out there on the roads, drive carefully, get home safely. Everything's going to be okay. It's all good. I don't know if that sounds reassuring or not, but I'm trying. So how you doing?
Well,
how's your day doing?
How am I doing? I'm doing awesome.
Well, that's good.
You know, on my Project X that I'm working on, my deliberate creation project.
Oh, yeah.
I'm calling Project X.
Yep.
I woke up this morning, and I had an awareness that I had a very unique feeling.
Oh.
And so I went, ooh, what is this? It felt really good. And let's see if I can find a way to describe it. It felt like, okay, I know how to describe it, but it's kind of like I'm afraid the way I'm going to say it is going to sound like how I don't want it to sound, so I'm going to do my best to, like, work around this. So it felt like I had just, okay, like if somebody marries, a female marries a man who is very affluent, who kind of yields respect and power, that woman would have, in a sense, up-leveled her status. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm following you.
Okay. So in other words, like Melania Trump, she was a respected model, but when she married Donald and became the first lady, her how you treat her has just been up-leveled.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
Yep, I got it.
So what it felt like to me is that up-leveling.
Oh.
And in other words, I didn't just connect with anybody to make that happen. I'm not hitching my wagon to somebody else's affluence. Mm-hmm. But it was like somehow internally my own personal sense of affluence, stature, perception, value, perceived value from the outside world, perceived value from me on my inside world just got up-leveled, and it caused me to feel more about myself. Like, I have a certain way I think about myself. I mean, I think of myself as a worthy human being and that kind of thing. But all of a sudden, it's kind of like if all of a sudden I decided to be really arrogant and boastful and about some huge accomplishment that I did in my life because I had really created this huge accomplishment and other people were applauding for me because it was such a magnanimous moment. That was the feeling I had.
Wow.
Like
okay.
Something really big inside of me has just been up-leveled to a new place without me doing anything physical on the outside.
It's almost like your confidence level just kind of built up, and you're saying that it seemed to have happened without any direct, specific cause that you can point to, but nevertheless it happened.
But it was even more than confidence. Like, think about a child born to the king and queen or the prince and princess of Wales. They're born into a level of stature that the rest of the kingdom is not, right?
Okay.
I felt like I was just up-leveled into the kingdom of royalty.
You're not going to go all princess on me, are you?
No. You know, it's not.
Sorry,
that's what I'm saying. It's not easy to put words to this.
No, I'm teasing you.
It was a feeling. But if you think about, you know, how would you treat, you know, a child born to Princess Kate? You would probably treat that child a little different than just your neighborhood child.
Well, yeah, this is true.
Who lives next door. So it's kind of like that child is born into that awareness that he or she is something, that he or she is like a rank above. I don't know how else to say it, but I know when I was, living in a very Christian world, I used to hear the phrase, you were born the child of the king.
Okay.
And that was a cool phrase, and it made me feel good every now and then, but it wasn't something that really stuck with me. But other Christians would often use that to kind of leverage, like, don't feel bad, you're a child of the king. And It's like, oh, yeah, okay. But when I woke up today, that feeling of being as though I am an aristocrat or of the royal family was what I was sensing.
Wow.
It was a very unique feeling. I've never felt that before, and it just stuck with me all day. And now I love synchronicity, okay? So I record a lot of movies and just leave them on my DVR until I get around to watching them. And the truth is I'm really not much of a movie watcher, but there are some I'm like, yeah, one day I'd like to see this. So I had recorded quite a while ago Cinderella, not the old version, but like kind of an updated version.
Okay.
And it was really cute.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to leave it on my DVR because I think I'm going to want to watch it again. It was just really cute.
Okay.
And today when I got to work, I walked across to my office and I turned on my computer. I felt like turning on the TV. And today I'm like, I want to watch the Cinderella movie.
Wow.
Which I wasn't connecting the feeling that I had and why I wanted to watch the Cinderella movie, but as I was having the Cinderella movie on, like, in the background, I started picking up on the synchronicity of the feeling I had.
Ah, yes. Okay.
And then by watching Cinderella as she's connecting with the prince, it kind of punctuated that feeling for me.
It. Sure, yeah.
As well as kind of confirming, like, yep, that's what you're feeling, and that's why I was drawn to that today. I was a match for it.
Wow.
So,
all I can say is the closest I've ever come to that feeling is watching an interview with, I can't remember which one of the children of one of the ex-presidents, talking about what it was like to have some staff member picking up her clothes and putting it away for her every day. So that's the closest I can come.
Why were you like vicariously living through that person? That day?
Apparently, I was. Yes, I was looking for the day when somebody else picks up my clothes for me. So,
what a cool idea! But the reason I share this because even though it was hard to explain, I'm sharing it because I want listeners to get an idea of how law of attraction really operates in our life. It's not always stuff. It's not always three-dimensional stuff. Or oh my gosh, I was just thinking of so-and-so and boom, they called. Those are kind of easy to recognize, that law of attraction is at work.
Right.
But what's not as easy to recognize is the stuff that's not talked about so much, such as I'm working on Project X, and I know in my heart that this feeling that I woke up with this morning is actually moving me towards Project X.
Wow.
Now, someone else may not be able to make that connection, but it's kind of like I know what I know because I'm asking that every day I get another thing that moves me towards the fulfillment of Project X, and I knew that this feeling was a part of that. It's part of my asking. It's part of even what's required to bring about Project X in the fulfillment of it.
Well, this certainly matches up with what you and some of the other co-hosts have been talking about with me for last few weeks or so. It seems like you're all on the same topic, which is listening to your inner impulses, your intuitions, and so forth. In fact, this morning, Cindy and I were talking about a favorite author of hers, somebody who wrote a book back in the early 1920s, an author named Florence, what was her name? Florence Scovel Shinn, that was it. And in her book, one of the things that she stated was that you should always pay attention to all intuitions and hunches that come your way and treat them as if they're valid, which kind of fits in very nicely with what you're talking about, I think.
I think so, too.
Yeah. So.
Because I felt it. I mean, I promise you, my eyes opened up. All of a sudden I had this feeling. I had the awareness of this feeling. I got excited by this feeling. And I just had a knowing, a deep, powerful knowing that this was a gift given to me to help me move towards the fulfillment of Project X.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, woohoo! So
Okay.
I was basking in
Wow.
that. And then, like, without even thinking, that's when I put on Cinderella, and I thought, why do I want to watch that today?
Yeah, that seems
You know,
kind of
it's
obvious
been on
to
my
me.
DVR for months. So.
Seems like a very obvious connection to me, but I can see when you're in the middle of it, you don't necessarily make that connection right away. Yeah, seriously.
Exactly.
I can see that. Yeah. And well, as usual, it ties into the topic, too, because we're still in Section 2 of the Law of Attraction, the basics of the teachings of Abraham, which we kind of broke into Part 2 in yesterday's episode. And we're now getting more into what the basic concepts are involved. Now, the subsection that we're looking at today is called My Thoughts Have Magnetic Power. And so in the case of your experience with this amazing feeling that you had, you attracted a feeling. You didn't just attract a thing. You attracted a feeling, and that's a feeling that apparently is reinforcing your whole ability to focus on Project X.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty strong stuff. Let me read from the book. It says, the law of attraction and its magnetic power reaches out into the universe and attracts other thoughts that are vibrationally like it and brings that to you. Your attention to subjects, your activation of thoughts, and the law of attraction's response to those thoughts is responsible for every person, every event, and every circumstance that comes into your experience. All of these things are brought into your experience through a sort of powerful magnetic funnel, as they are vibrational matches to your own thoughts. And then in italics, you get the essence of what you are thinking about, whether it is something you want or something you do not want. Now, that may be unsettling to you at first, but in time, it is our expectation that you will come to appreciate the fairness, the consistency, and the absoluteness of this powerful law of attraction. I have to admit, that is something that the first time I thought about it, I said, oh dear, I got to be careful.
Well, especially if some of the thoughts about what you don't want have been plaguing you so consistently that you don't even recognize that they're there. You just know the results of those thoughts, but you don't even know what the thoughts are. So, yeah, that is kind of daunting to, be aware that the essence of what you're thinking about, whether it's something you want or something you don't want, is going to show up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I first got exposed to this concept that the law of attraction attracts regardless of whether you want it, that was also a time when I was still feeling very depressed. I was trying to learn about this stuff as a way to climb out of that depression. And when I realized what they were saying, and then I thought about what it is I've been thinking about, all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, I've got all these thoughts going on, and I'm attracting all this stuff. How do I turn the spigot off? And it says you can't turn it off. It just keeps coming anyway. Oh, no. But that's how I felt. I remember that. And among other things, it gave me the motivation to really start learning how to apply this thing and to do it to my benefit rather than to my detriment. So in that sense, it was kind of a kick in the butt. Mm-hmm. But, it does take a little while to get used to it. Once you get used to it, I think actually it makes a lot of sense. It helps make sense out of this whole LOA thing. Because without it, it sounds airy-fairy, It just sounds like, you wave your magic wand whenever you want to get something nice. And that's all there is to it. But it also doesn't make a lot of sense when you say it that way. So,
well, and if that's all there was to it, an awful lot of people would be living very differently.
Oh, yeah.
They have, everything that they want.
Absolutely.
And that's not the case.
That's right.
So.
And what would be even more amusing is they'd have everything they'd want, and they'd still be miserable. Because all they know how to do is the airy-fairy part. They don't know how to do the part, how do you deal with the other part of your life that you're not happy with? The most you could do is just do another airy-fairy thing and get some other wonderful thing, and then you're still miserable. It doesn't really help you much. So, anyway, let's get to the next part of the book. Where is it? Where did I leave off? Oh, here we go. Yes. Once you understand this law and begin to pay attention to what you're giving your attention to, you will regain control of your own life experience. I certainly wanted to do that. That was big for me. And with that control, you will again remember that there is nothing that you desire that you cannot achieve, and there is nothing that you do not want that you cannot release from your own experience. That was a relief. I was glad to hear that.
Well, that kind of answers what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
You were kind of freaking out,
Yeah.
By, there's all this negative stuff, but it's nice to at least be given some hope, that there's nothing you cannot release from your experience.
Yeah. Of course, the next step was, all right, so how do I do it? And that's what I was hoping to find in the next step. So let's see what it says. Understanding the law of attraction and recognizing the absolute correlation between what you have been thinking and feeling and what is manifesting in your life experience will cause you to be more aware of the stimulation of your own thoughts. You will begin to notice that your own thoughts may be stimulated from something you read or watch on television. Cindy, you watch something or Wendy, rather, you watch something on television. What a surprise. Or hear or observe from someone else's experience. And once you see the effect that the law of attraction has upon these thoughts that begin small and grow larger and more powerful with your attention to them, you will feel a desire within you to begin to direct your thoughts to more of the things that you do want to experience. For whatever you are pondering, and no matter what the source of stimulation of that thought, as you begin that thought, the law of attraction goes to work and begins to offer you other thoughts, conversations, and experiences that are of a similar nature. Okay, I remember reading something like this about the same time that I began to understand that LOA always applies in every situation. And I remember what my reaction was. I mean, this isn't the exact passage that I read. I think it was actually something similar in Ask It and It Is Given. But it was basically the same general idea. And after I read it, I said to myself, okay, well, that makes sense. But how do I do it? It's like they tried to explain it, and the explanation just went right by me. Like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? It's just one of those things. Sometimes you have to read these things a few times, That's what I found. I found that even when I got the information that I was asking for, it often didn't come in the way I expected to receive it. So I had to go through it again 2 or 3 times so that I could try to receive it in the way that they were feeling it and expressing it, and see if I could understand from that perspective, was there a way to start to implement that? And that is when I started to finally realize, okay, now there's some depth to this that I wasn't picking up the first time around.
I think one of the hugest distinctions to make is that there's a vast difference between knowing something and understanding how to apply it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I found that out firsthand.
And, I mean, Abraham does both, but oftentimes they give more of the, here's what you need to know.
Right.
And not as much of the here's how you do it. And even when they do share the here's how you do it part, if an individual is so used to doing something a different way and you have a chronic behavior, sometimes it's hard to even hear and take in when they say, here's how to do it differently, because you kind of go, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Mm.
And I think that's a common thing for a lot of people, including myself.
Yeah, I think
because
so
I'll
too.
hear something over and over, and I'm like, I'm not getting it. I know you're telling me what to do, but it's still a little bit too vague for me because I could have sworn I was doing that. But obviously I'm not by the results that are showing up in my life.
Right.
So for me, what I would do is I would just ask the universe, help me understand the distinction of how I can go from where I am to what I'm hearing is possible. Because there is a gap between the two, and I don't know how to bridge that gap. So, hey, universe, would you bring me whatever I need in order to bridge that gap so I could get to the other side? And it always came, and it still does, but it's a matter of how receptive I am to receiving the information. And sometimes it could be a matter of moments before the answer comes, and sometimes it could be years.
Which means you were actually trying to learn how to apply it by asking the universe to prove that the phenomenon exists by applying it. I mean, you were basically asking the universe to deliver something to you, which is a manifestation, and you were trying to ask the universe to do that so you could learn how to do your own deliberate creation. It's like this conundrum wrapped in a riddle kind of a thing.
Well, I hadn't wrapped in a riddle until you just said it. I'm like, is that what I did?
Well, I'm not sure that you
just
did
thought
it.
I was asking a question.
I'm not sure that you did
for an
that.
answer.
It's just the way that I was looking at it when I was first exploring this stuff. I was saying, okay, so I guess I'm supposed to practice doing this thing that I'm not sure how to practice doing in order to get information about how to practice doing it.
I get that.
I got it a lot, actually. It was yeah, it's been quite a thing. And it does seem simple. I mean, the concept, like you say, is very simple. And then you try it and you don't get the result you expected and you say, well, you say one of two things. Either this stuff is a bunch of nonsense or you say, I must be doing it wrong. I always said the second one. I figured that, unless I consistently got really, really bad results and heard about everybody else getting consistently bad results, I wasn't ready to throw this thing out the window yet. So if I was getting the wrong result, I said to myself, well, what am I doing? And I didn't know. And we're actually not even up to the part yet where they explain that. But I was kind of doing what I usually do. I was jumping ahead about 2 chapters. I need to, seriously, no, I would do that. I was asking questions about, well, how do you make this stuff work when I hadn't even gotten that far into the book? But I didn't know it. I didn't realize that it was yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
Well, that's something I learned quite a while back. Gosh, I don't even remember the source of it. But actually, it might have been a speed reading course that I was taking, which, by the way, I didn't do so. Exercises, so I'm not a speed reader. But one of the things that they talked about is if you find yourself reading something and you don't quite get it, what most people do is they stop and reread that sentence over and over and over. And for the sake of speed reading, their recommendation was that you don't read it over. You keep reading another couple sentences or even a couple paragraphs, because oftentimes what's coming is going to answer what you just read, and at the moment you don't yet understand.
Okay.
And so I've actually been practicing that ever since I took that course about 5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it has helped me tremendously because, to me, once I have a question, in the past it used to just stop me in my tracks, like I cannot move forward until I have this question answered. And now I'm like, all right, here's a question, bookmark that question in my mind, and let's just keep reading and see if the author will answer that question in natural time so that it doesn't drive me crazy.
Mm.
And it usually works. And what I like about that now is that I don't thwart my progress, because that's actually what I had been doing. I would just stop, and until I could get that question answered, I didn't continue reading. And what this teacher was saying is keep reading, because sometimes the author purposely wants you to have a question in your mind so that when you come to the answer, you're ready to receive it. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's true. I think another way of looking at the same thing, and the way I would tend to look at it, is I was always impatient. If I got to a question I didn't have the answer readily available and I had to wait a little bit for the answer to come, my attitude was, well, I want it now. I don't want to have to wait. Don't make me wait another 2 pages. I want it right now, which, of course, is not a terribly mature viewpoint, but nevertheless, that's the way I felt about it. And it wasn't until I kind of relaxed that I could do exactly what you're talking about. Just, okay, we'll just kind of let it be what it is for the moment. We'll just wait and see what they have to say, because, like you say, maybe this is going to get answered. And very often it is answered, often within a few pages.
Well, cool. So maybe if our listeners have some questions based on what we've read so far and talked about so far, that the answers are on their way.
That's right. Yep. So where does it take us next? Well, let's see. It says, whether you are remembering the past, observing the present, or imagining the future, you are doing it right now, and whatever you are focusing upon is causing an activation of a vibration that the law of attraction is responding to. I have to admit, the first time I started thinking about that kind of stuff, activating vibrations by what I'm focusing on or what the law of attraction responds to, I'm thinking to myself, what are they talking about? What vibrations? I know they mentioned vibrations before, but what are they talking about?
Well, when I really caught on to this topic, just on this little thing about, everything is right in the now, I started to understand better how if a person, including myself, has gone through some traumatic experience, let's say in childhood, and a victim of abusive something, or I was an abused child, let's just say that. If today, as a grown adult, I'm still, like associating myself with being an abused child, I'm identifying, that's the word I'm looking for. I'm still identifying with being an abused child. What I'm hearing from Abraham and what like Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now and some other, authors that have talked on the subject of being present is the abuse isn't happening today. The abuse happened many, many years ago. But by my putting my attention on it and focusing on it and talking about it and being part of a survivors, chat room and going to abuse workshops, I'm continually bringing the past experience into my present now because I'm focusing on the abuse now, even though it's not actually happening to me. And so when I started to recognize that we carry our past with it, and talk about baggage, like if we lug it with us and we keep talking about it, we're constantly reactivating it because every moment is a fresh new moment to make a new choice as to what we want to focus on. And if we continue to focus on what we don't like from the past, it's not in the past, it's in the present. And so that really shifted how I think about the past. It's like I make deliberate decisions now. If I want to talk about something that happened in my past, I can do so if I want to, but I do so with the understanding I'm bringing my past into my present.
So, I mean, what you just described was very eloquent. In terms of what I was trying to understand at the time, how do you tie that into the idea of a vibration and that you're activating a vibration?
Well, because every thought equals a vibration. Every thought has a vibrational quality to it. Just like every object, the picture hanging on my wall has atoms and molecules dancing around that make up that picture on my wall. Well, in the same way, a thought has energy or vibrations that make it a thought. And so if I'm thinking about a thought from my past, those thoughts have a vibrational quality to them. And if I focus on them today, right now in this moment, I'm actually energizing or activating those vibrations right now, and that's what Law of Attraction responds to.
I'm beginning to think that we need to invent a new device. We're going to call it the Wendy Reader. And the Wendy Reader... The Wendy Reader is something that comes with every book that you buy. And when you get to a point of the book where you're just not quite getting it, you push the button on the Wendy Reader, and the Wendy Reader kicks in and says, okay, so here's what you're trying to understand here. I mean, it would be ideal to have that. That would be a perfect thing.
That's funny. But I promise you, I'm only this good on Law of Attraction. This is my expertise. Because if you asked me about other things, I'd go, I need to Google this. I don't know the answer.
All right, so we got to have different names for different topics. But for the Law of Attraction Reader, it's the Wendy Reader. We'll go with that.
Okay, I accept that.
Oh, I thought the Wendy Reader was a good product idea. I mean, it would probably sell millions.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you want to name the definer of what these things mean based on the Wendy Reader. Now
I just have to figure out how to invent it, but, one thing at a time.
What's to invent? I'm here.
That's right, you're here, yes. Well, I was just trying to mass produce you, that's all.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to mass produce me, too. I wish I could be, physically in more than one place at a time,
that's
getting
right,
more than
yes.
one thing accomplished at a time.
It's kind of like one of those little virtual things that you find on a website sometimes. Ask your question here, and then an artificial intelligence program tries to have a conversation with you and ask you what you want. I actually was doing one of those today with, what was it with? Oh, I think it was I think it was with alternative to Skype. I was looking into are there ways so we can tie in another VoIP system, maybe deal with some of the little quick outage things we've had. And I was on this one particular site that was offering a service, and they said, well, ask your question here. So I asked my question, and it said, it sounds like you're asking about X. And I said, no, I'm asking about Y. And it says, okay, well, tell me again what you want. So I'd ask about Y. It says, it sounds like you're asking about X. I said, well, this conversation's not going anywhere. So clearly the implementation...
Wouldn't it be nice if then you could press a button and say, we are now in a loop. Please disengage and go to a live operator.
with a distinct four-letter word at the end of it.
Oh, you're too funny.
Well, at least I'm enjoying this stuff. So,
well, that's good.
It is a good thing, yes. But no, seriously, getting back to the topic at hand, that was a point of frustration for me early on, trying to get a handle on what all this vibration stuff was. And even to this day, I only have a semi-clear picture of it in my mind. I mean, initially, I had no picture at all. Vibrating, what was vibrating? Was it my fingernail? I don't know what was vibrating. But now I kind of have like this mental image of, like, if I was going to illustrate a thought, maybe like, on a whiteboard or something like that, I'd put like this little cloud-like circle on and label that thought, and I have another cloud-like circle here and label that thought, and I have two arrows pointing, the direction that these things are flying in, and then there's like little lines coming off it saying these are vibrating and so forth. And when I start putting that kind of picture together, I can kind of visualize it. But I mean, it's like the joke I made the other day. When you have a thought in your vortex of a trip on a cruise ship, and it's coming at you, is this like the actual cruise ship coming at you? Do you have to get out of the way?
That's cute.
But
that reminds me of how, based on whatever your filters are, or your beliefs, or what your points of references are, that's how when people talk, you like put images together as to what something means. And this may be off topic, but I think it's funny. When I was really little, like maybe 5, 6 years old, and people would talk about, pregnancy, and, my mom had just had my little brother, and so, I kind of came up with my own idea because, people would say, well, your brother's in mama's belly. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're like 5 years old, or actually at that point I was probably 3. That didn't really make sense. But over time, what I figured out, this was the visual image that I came up with to understand how carries a child.
Mm-hmm.
So the baby belly is in the same location inside of the mother's belly. And then I pictured the baby arms stretching through the mama's arms, and the baby legs stretching through the mama's legs. Now, granted, throw scale out of the picture because I wasn't thinking about the baby is only 2 inches long. I wouldn't have understood that. But to me, that just seemed natural. Like the legs should go in the legs, the arms should go in the arm, and the belly should go in the belly, and the head should go in the head. And that's how I pictured how women carry babies.
I have to ask you now, I mean, given the explanation you came up with yourself, how did you figure that the kid got in there in the first place?
Oh, I hadn't gotten there, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just, that's too much for me to, at that age, to have even cared about or thought about.
Okay.
I was just trying to consider, how does a baby fit inside of a mama?
Uh-huh.
And that was the image I came up with. And once I came up with that image, I was satisfied until I was older and I learned differently.
Yeah. I can see that, yeah.
Well, and so how does this fit with what you were just saying? Well, when you were first learning about law of attraction and you'd hear certain words like vibration, you didn't know what to do with it because you didn't have a meaning that made sense for you yet.
Right.
So you were contriving all sorts of different images, whether literal pictures or conceptual images, to try to make sense of what this law of attraction thing was.
Exactly, yeah.
And all you can use are your own points of reference.
Yep.
Until you learn something otherwise.
The only problem is I haven't come up with something better otherwise. I still have this image of the clouds on the whiteboard floating around with arrows pointing in different directions of the directions that they're going in. Yeah. I still don't know what happens when they meet. Do they collide? Do they go through each other? What happens? I don't know. I can't figure that one out. What happens when two thoughts meet?
So what's the part that's throwing you?
No, seriously. Let's say we're talking about thoughts. Everything vibrates, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so give me a three-dimensional image or even four-dimensional. I don't care how many dimensions you use. Give me an image that explains to me what it looks like to have a thought vibrating. What does that do? And then when it's vibrating, how does that vibration translate into motion? See, I have this mind that just drives people crazy, including me. It drives me crazier than anybody else. Because I keep coming up with these things trying to model it, and I don't know how to model it. How do you draw that? I don't know how to draw that.
I'm thinking, Walt.
Well, tell you what, while you're thinking, I'm going to remind people that we want them to subscribe and share to the podcast. because this is the kind of thing that keeps people wanting to come back. I mean, literally, when people subscribe to the podcast, our numbers keep showing it. This last month, January, the average person, and we were able to track, who are the unique individuals who are listening to the podcast simply by looking at the IP addresses. So for any given IP address, we would have, on average, 30 plays for that individual. That means people are liking this. They keep playing all the episodes. They want to keep hearing more. So subscribing is a good idea. It's pretty obvious why it's a good idea. And to do it, you just go to loatoday.net, and for most people, just clicking on the click here to subscribe button will do it. If you do have an Android phone and you do not have some kind of podcast software installed, you will need to go first to the Play Store and download some kind of podcast application. We recommend the Podcast Manager just because it's a nice one. And
you know what?
Free.
It's so simple because I'm an Android user.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to the Play Store and you just type in podcast. And you will get a list of so many different podcasting apps. I picked the one called Podcast Manager. It's free, and it was simple. I did several of them, but that's the one I like the best.
Okay. Well, that's why we go with it, because you're our local Android expert, and so we go with your recommendation. But the point is, you got to have that in there first. Once you've got that, then you can do the search for LOA Today, and we pop right up. So that makes it
and
really
LOA
easy.
space today.
LOA space today. Yes, you don't want to merge them all together because otherwise the software says, "What the heck are you talking about?"
Exactly. And then the cool thing is, every time I click, because like now I have the podcast player as a little icon on my phone. Every time I click it, it opens up, and I've saved LOA Today as one of my favorites. So it's always available to me. So once I click on it, boom, I get all this list of all the different shows I can listen to.
Yes, that's the cool part. When you subscribe to a podcast, you get all of it. All you have to do is turn on your phone and take a look, and boom, you've got the entire list of whatever the latest stuff is right in front of you, right there on your fingertips, and you just click the one you want to play and start playing a show. So definitely worth doing. And then don't forget the second part is subscribe and share. So after you've subscribed, send a note out to a buddy and say, hey, got to check out this thing I've been listening to. It's really good, and you'll love it. It's fun, and they have these really wild jokes by this really stupid host that comes up with these crazy jokes. You got to listen to this.
That would be you, right?
That would be me, yes. No, I was not talking about Wendy.
I'm weird, but you're crazy.
No. You're the Wendy reader. You're the one who explains everything.
Oh. Okay.
I suppose this podcast should come along with a lexicon. Lexicon of terms. Here's what the terms mean when you're listening to the podcast.
That's right. And remember, icky is one of my technical terms that I use quite often.
Well, we credit you with that one. Under technical/icky, that's where the definition is. So that's where you'll find it. Yeah. No one can ever accuse us of not having fun on the show.
That's right.
That's right.
Under the lexicon, it'll say icky, and it'll just say Wendy's word for negative feelings or negative thoughts.
Very precise, I must say. I like that. That's good. Nice, concise, to the point. That's good. I like that. Now, all we have to do is write the rest of the lexicon, and we'll be great.
Maybe that's all that's necessary.
So anyway, getting back to the book that the section that had confused me, once I got past my discomfort with the fact that I still didn't know what vibration was, I continue to read. At first, you may be privately pondering a particular subject. I was thinking about vibration. But if you think about it long enough, you will start to notice other people beginning to discuss it with you as the law of attraction finds others who are offering a similar vibration and brings them right to you. The longer you focus upon something, the more powerful it becomes, and the stronger that your point of attraction is to it, and the more evidence of it appears in your life experience. Especially when you do a podcast and you put out, silly thoughts like that, and they come back from your co-host, you say, "Oh yeah, well, this law of attraction stuff really works."
Well, so let's kind of, I'd love to talk about what that little paragraph meant.
Okay.
So what I find oftentimes happens, Walt, is you and I will talk about something on the show, something that, I hadn't really been thinking about. And then as soon as I hang up with you, all of a sudden I start to see, like maybe I'll have the TV on and somebody will be discussing something very similar to what you and I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say we talked about a word that, we've never used, like the word consequence.
Right.
We were talking about yesterday,
That's
and I was
right,
like, he defines it differently than me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of a sudden yesterday I noticed in the evening as I was just kind of, going through my own internal dialogue like I normally do, the word consequence was showing up all over the place.
Of course it was.
And that is law of attraction.
Yeah.
It's like we talked about it long enough that law of attraction got hold of it and said, okay, we'll bring more of that to Wendy. And so then it was quite fascinating how I'd be thinking about something, and as I think about it, like I think about it in my own words, the word consequence was showing up in certain sentences, and I'm like, and this wasn't on TV. This was inside my own head.
Mm.
I haven't used the word consequences probably in years.
And all of a sudden it's just dominating you. I'm sorry I did that to you. Please accept my apology. I mean, I didn't want to thrust consequences on you.
Well, no, because every time I thought about it, I went, okay, consequences are not always negative. Consequences really mean, it's just the resulting something. And I went, that's pretty cool. But what I like about that is it's evidence of how law of attraction actually works in our lives. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we don't recognize it, or we might go, it's a coincidence that I just happened to be thinking that. It wasn't a coincidence. Law of attraction was actually handing that word to me to use in my own sentences.
Well, that's true, and it's true for me too, obviously, because it's true for all of us. But in this particular case, consequences and the definition that I shared with you yesterday, that is a key definition in the world of Sudbury schools. We talked about Sudbury schools that one day. And in the Sudbury environment, one of the things that you learn to do as a staff member or as a parent or an adult on the General Assembly of the school is you learn the importance of keeping your hands off. You learn the importance that since this is a school where the kids are running the school and they're in charge of their own education and they're in charge of what they're learning day by day, you have to basically bite your tongue, hold back, and just withhold for the thing that you want to do, and that is to interfere and say, look, you should be doing this, you should be focusing on that, you should be studying this, you should be learning this, and just letting them go in their own way that seems pretty crazy to you, like, why does that kid keep playing the video game? He's been doing it for 5 weeks now. You have to just let them go in that direction, knowing perfectly well that the natural consequences of life will end up feeding back to that person the information they need so they can make the decision about where they're going to go next. Consequences become a really critical thing within the whole concept of a Sudbury school. So I'm steeped in that, right? That's something I spent a lot of time on, particularly at the time that Louise and I and the others that we were involved with founded the school in New Britain, Connecticut back in 2002. Well, once you're steeped in something like that, anytime the word comes up, it comes right to the forefront. I mean, it's like right there. You're ready for it. And that's what happened yesterday. As soon as we were talking about what you were going through with Project X and the word consequences came to my mind, all that information about consequences came flooding into me.
Well, you bring up a really cool point because I would say you have a working understanding of the word consequences and how to use it, because it was so steeped in the process of you developing the Sudbury School.
Exactly.
So I don't use the word consequences that often, so needless to say, I don't really have a working definition. In other words, I know the definition, but it feels very manual for me to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it just rolls off the tip of my tongue like it does for you. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is because I'm wondering if right now you don't have a working definition for vibration, and I do. And so vibration kind of just rolls off my tongue on a regular basis, and to even ask me what it means, I can give you a definition, but how did I bridge the gap from manually knowing what vibration meant in the way law of attraction explains it, and how it's part of just my working knowledge base today is a matter of working with it.
Right.
You know, and perhaps you haven't worked with it long enough for that to become a natural word for you.
Yeah.
And so it still feels a little stilted.
Oh, it does.
Think about the word.
I mean, I'm definitely better than I was, say, 10 years ago when I was first exposed to it. But I've come around slowly on this vibration concept. There were a number of years I just wouldn't even use it at all. I just figured it was just too confusing, and all it was doing was messing with my head. And I was learning how to do all this stuff without it, so just stay away from it. Until finally it got rubbed in my nose so many times I realized this was a key piece of information. I really needed to learn this, so then I started paying attention to it. But you're right, I still don't have a really clear handle on it, and I think it's something that's been growing over time. Probably one of the reasons we're talking about today. It's like popping up, here's another opportunity, Walt, for you to get an idea of what this vibration stuff's all about.
But, to be honest, law of attraction and how Abraham Hicks describes law of attraction, the whole body of work really has its own vocabulary. It has its own terminology. And, like, I work in a company that's an IT research firm, and so I'm surrounded by IT technology conversation all the time. But I remember when I first started at this company 10-plus years ago, the conversations that today I just manage with ease, I felt like I was in a foreign country because every sentence that every one of my coworkers used, I felt like I had to look up 3 words for every sentence because it was so foreign to me.
Yeah, I know
and so
feeling.
I think every time we kind of start learning something new in a new field or a new industry or a new concept, there does seem to be a whole bunch of new terms.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in the, I think it was the 80s and 90s, the recovery movement had began. Well, you know what, to a millennial, they go, what's a recovery movement? But to me, in the 90s, you heard it on Oprah on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was just part of our vocabulary. So, and limited thinking and, what are some of the other buzzwords? Toxic parenting, toxic relationships. Those were all buzzwords during that time.
They were.
Well, the first time I ever heard somebody talking about toxic in terms of people, I'm like, what? I mean, I know toxic environment as in pollution, but what does that mean when you put the word toxic and parent together? That seems weird.
Yeah, I kind of expected to see parents lying dead in the aisle of the theater or something.
Well, with as much blaming as we did during the recovery movement, I'm surprised our parents weren't lying dead. But I think like I said, with any new something, there is its own vocabulary, and vibration is one of the big vocabulary words in law of attraction, since the whole concept of what is being attracted are vibrations.
Yeah, you're right, and that's what I have been trying to do over the last few years especially, is just appreciating the way that they use their concepts, the way they frame everything from their perspective, and trying to make sense of it that way. And that does help. That does help. When I start looking at it that way, then I find I'm less interested in trying to figure out, well, what does that little whiteboard look like? Because I don't think about it in terms of the whiteboard anymore. Now I'm just trying to think about it in their terms. And I can't say I'm 100% satisfied with it, but it certainly has been helping. I mean, certainly the idea that a vibration is representative of, how you feel about it and how it resonates with other stuff that goes on in your life or that you think about, that has made a lot more sense as time has gone on. I mean, there have been some times where I just wanted them to say, "Oh, screw the vibration stuff. You know, just tell me it's the same kind of thing." But I'm getting better at it. You know.
Over the weekend, I was watching a program. It was an Oprah Super Soul Sunday, and she had on a guest, Louis somebody, who was a filmmaker, and his life's work is filming things in nature.
Mm.
And he's doing it with, is it called a time-released photography?
Yeah.
The thing where the camera is sitting on it for like days, weeks, months, and then he shows it in like a 20-second clip, and you get to see how flowers bloom and flowers die, and, you know, just sunsets and all these beautiful things. Well, there were two things that I want to bring up here. One, he filmed bees, and in slow motion, you got to see bees flapping their wings.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also filmed hummingbirds.
Oh.
Which this I'd never seen before, but the hummingbird itself, not only could you see the wings moving, which, you know, when you're really looking at a hummingbird, you can barely see it because they flap their wings so fast.
Right.
But they showed this one being an acrobat, like literally turning upside down and spinning spirals. As though it was saying, "This is what I can do, and it's fun to be a hummingbird."
Yeah.
But the reason I mention this, Walt, is because I know from what I've learned about bees and hummingbirds is they flap their wings so fast it's not perceivable with my natural eye.
Right.
Now, it is obviously with his timed, you know, released photography, and he slowed it down so you can physically see the motion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if, in a sense, we can think about vibration that way. That vibration is something that you can't really see with the naked eye, but you know it exists.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if that helps at all, but because it's like I'm really I'm wanting to be helpful to you, you know, what is a visual that you can come up with?
Well, actually, now I want to
like
see his time-lapse photography of something vibrating. That's really what I want to see right now. But
well, there you go. So maybe that's something you can Google. It's time-lapse photography on hummingbirds or bees.
Well, actually, I wanted to see the time-lapse photography of vibration. I want to see the actual vibration in time-lapse photography. That would be really cool. I'm not sure how to do that, but that would be really cool.
Well, I do have mentally stored in my memory, somebody doing a time-lapsed image of a pitchfork.
Really?
And and when they like flicked with like a little baton the pitchfork, which that particular pitchfork was in high C, that you literally could see the tines on the pitchfork in motion. You saw them moving.
Huh.
Now, what you couldn't see is what they were trying to describe is how when those little tines were moving back and forth, it was sending ripples of energy out in 360 degrees from it.
Right, in the form of sound waves.
And across the room, about 10 or 12 feet, they had set another high C pitchfork.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm tuning fork, not pitchfork, a tuning fork. And I don't remember what the amount of time was. Maybe it was 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But you could actually hear the high C pitch all of a sudden being resonated from the tuning fork that was across the room.
Mm-hmm.
And as they did this time-lapse photography, the one across the room you could now see vibrating.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was to kind of illustrate how law of attraction works, that when you activate one tuning fork, because the tuning fork on the other side of the room was of the same quality of vibration, because it was also a high C, that when you activated one, the energy that vibrated out of the first tuning fork actually found the second tuning fork and caused it to vibrate.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
The same vibration.
Yeah. Yeah, that analogy is very good. Because ultimately
Were you able to visualize that? Were you able to visualize that?
Oh, yeah, sure. And taking it to the next step, Okay, so how do I apply that to the concept of thoughts and objects and so forth vibrating in sympathy with each other? Because that's essentially what law of attraction says happens. They're the same vibrational thing. And not only how do they vibrate in sympathy, but then I try to imagine, okay, well, they're also drawing together, because that's the attraction part, right? Law of attraction. So the similar vibration is causing them to move together, and that gets really, it's starting to bend the mental illustration a little bit. But then I imagine, okay, well, a whole bunch of stuff is vibrating on the same frequency, and it's all starting to come together. And what's it doing? Is it clumping together? Is it forming shapes? What's it doing? In fact, actually, this ties in very nicely with something that they said. I think it was earlier in this book. I can't remember which book, because I'm doing so many books on the shows right now. I'm not sure which one's which. But they were talking about the difference between thinking a thought, and then it manifests into a thought form, and then it manifests into an actual physical object. And I wanted to ask you about that, because you're the one who would have a good take on that. What do you see as being a thought form?
My understanding of a thought form is any particular topic or subject where individuals have thought about it over and over and over with intensity, or that one person has thought the same thought, maybe in a specific space, over and over and over, and then a thought form, like the vibration, I'm gonna use a word, I don't even know if it's right, like the vibrational resonance or residue of those thoughts are left in a space, even if you've walked away from it. And the way I would use to describe that is, because I have a chair in my house that I use for meditation, or I use for like quiet work, if I just want to think on something, still work. I love going back to this one chair, because that chair, I know, holds the thought forms of energy, of calmness, peacefulness. And so it's easy for me to go, it's kind of like it sets an environment. So it's easy for me to go to that chair, because it's like the environment is already set for that peacefulness and calmness, versus if I go and walk outside and sit on a park bench I've never sat on before. It's like I'm having to start from scratch with my thoughts.
So it's kind of like an echo of the previous thought, or perhaps in another sense it's a shadow of it.
Yeah, you could say that, but it's kind of like, Abraham says every thought that's ever been thought still exists. Thoughts cannot be destroyed.
Is a thought form something that's starting to come together in a matter-like way, but it hasn't gotten there yet? It's just starting to create the form?
Well, if I think a thought one time, I'm making this up, it's like maybe the framework of a thought form is now created, but there's no additional thoughts that have been added to it, so it's just a framework where one thought exists.
Okay.
So here, let me do it this way. So let's say somebody uses a particular meeting room for an AA meeting, and it's the first time the AA meeting is ever held. So as people are talking about their AA stuff, a framework for the AA stuff is there. But now if they keep coming back week after week, day after day, and they keep adding more thoughts of the same kind, let's say 10 years down the road, they decide to move to a different space, and now somebody else leases that room, they will have walked into, I would imagine, a very thick thought form of all the thoughts that people have talked about in their AA meetings.
Okay, yeah, I can make sense out
and
of that.
And they may not be aware of them unless they themselves have some kind of thoughts that they have active that would match those thoughts.
Well, one thing I am aware of is that we've run out of time, so we're going to have to pick up the discussion again tomorrow. But, Wendy, this has been great. I'm loving that we're doing this. Let's keep doing it tomorrow.
Okay, you got it.
And we'll invite you back as well tomorrow here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.